I'm going to be talking to you now about automated privacy policies. We've talked about security in social networks, we've talked about privacy as well, and the need to protect your personal data from malicious interventions that could lead to, for example, identity theft. So today I'll start by looking at privacy policies to begin with, and then we look at the concept of automation and automated privacy policies. I have to say at the beginning now that automated privacy policies are not the regular thing that you would find on social media platforms or other internet platforms, just because they require some more work, and that work is in process in research organizations. Okay, so think about, for example, advertising. With advertising, for example, on Facebook, Facebook allows businesses to make pages and to try to attract customers based on information that is made available on Facebook. So, for example, this page here allows for a business to market products on Facebook and to try to attract other users who would be interested in the business. And the whole concept is about forming a community of people who are likely to want to purchase the products that the business is advertising. The problem with this is that sometimes this can become annoying, right? So we don't want to always have to receive messages about shoes that are being advertised for sale, or maybe, for example, food products or grocery stores if we are not interested in these products. What you can do is to set your privacy settings to ensure that you do not receive these sorts of messages if you do not want to receive them. And we looked at how you can do this, for example, by clicking on this little button right here, okay, to open up a page that allows you to determine what you want to do. For example, with comments, you can decide whom you want to broadcast comments to and whom you want to receive comments or notifications, for example, from. Okay, and this can allow you to control your privacy settings, to control the way you interact with other users on the social network, and the way that your privacy is made available to, your private data is made available to these businesses. And what I'm trying to point out here is that for the most part, this is going to be something that you have to do, so there is no automatic way of doing this for now. Okay. There has been some effort to automate privacy policies. So automation is basically to say that you have defined, for example, your profile to say this is what I want to make available in terms of my personal data on the social media platform. And this is how I want to interact, for example, with users. And then based on this information that you've given, the system should be able to study your behavior and take decisions for you automatically. So for example, if somebody contacts you to want to be your friend, based on some of the privacy settings that you've defined, or based on privacy settings that users that are similar to you have defined, the social media platform can automatically assign privacy settings with respect to the new user. And this would be quite nice, because it would mean that you don't need to worry about, for example, receiving unsolicited messages and so on. But this doesn't exist for now on Facebook. There has been, for example, on other social media platforms, but just because it isn't yet quite there yet, but it's in the pipeline. The normal thing to do would be that you would have your normal privacy settings and tools which build on what I just pointed out in the previous slide, which allow you to go further to define, for example, who can see your stuff, who especially can contact you, which is important for what I was talking about with respect to advertising. Okay, So automation, as I was saying before, is basically to support you with setting your privacy settings, right? So for example, on Windows platforms or on other operating systems platforms, you have cases in which you're prompted to take decisions or to ask questions, and that is pretty much what we hope for in privacy automation, that we will come to a point where you can define your profile and we can ask you what things you want to protect, and progressively, by asking you these questions, build a picture or a map of what it is you would want, and to drive this in terms of software and to support this by behavior that is similar to yours, looking at both your profile and that of other similar users. There have been some efforts, for example, on social media platforms, particularly on Facebook as well, to create what are called privacy wizards. So privacy wizards are pretty much little tools that will run, for example, when you set up your profile to ask you what it is you want in terms of privacy, what you want to protect and what you don't want to protect. But you can't rely completely on these tools because they are not perfect. So it helps if you can check to make sure that you're actually protecting what it is that you want to be protecting. Okay, so to go back a little bit in the theory or the expectation of how an automated privacy model or an automated privacy tool is supposed to work or should work when that time comes and when it is implemented in most social media platforms, is to say, for example, that you have a group of users, okay, who, for example, constitute, say, Alice, Dave, Carol, and Bob, okay? And these users are users who are similar. So they could be, for example, students who are studying the same course, or maybe people who are interested in the same activity, and so on. And the point is to say that these sorts of people who are forming, for example, a group in a social media platform are going to have similar characteristics and similar decisions or similar expectations for privacy. And so what the system would do is to try to extract common features or common patterns. So for example, that you all live in the same city, or that you all go to the same school, or that you all have the same activity. And based on all of these features that are extracted from all of the users, then a privacy preference model is sort of constructed. And this is constructed based on looking at all of the privacy settings that we had before to say, okay, if everybody doesn't want, for example, friends of friends to see the material, then it makes sense that everybody in this group, or at least if the majority are wanting this, then it makes sense to try to persuade the whole group to do so. And the reason that we want to persuade the whole group to do so is because of what we talked about, for example, when we are trying to anonymize social networks graphs and to avoid having weak links that lead to de-anonymizations of the graph. Okay, and then once this has been defined, then you get some sort of privacy settings that go in line with the privacy settings that you have or you would normally have manually defined on your social media platform. And then it pretty much works in terms of user prompts. So for example, when you're installing a new software on your device or on your computer, you get some prompts. Do you want to do this? Do you want this feature, or do you want that feature, or would you prefer to have some more help automatically from the system? And hopefully when we have incorporated that into privacy settings manipulations, we hope that we will have these sorts of mechanisms that guide users into choosing or setting privacy policies. And this is what I'm talking about when I'm talking about automated privacy policies. In Facebook, for example, there was a couple of years back some help, some progression towards automated privacy policy settings. So basically what happened was that you went off and you defined your privacy policies, and then once you had done that, or you had set your privacy requests or determined what it is you wanted in terms of privacy with respect to your interactions with your friends, then something like this popped up at the end of all of it to make sure that you had done what it is you wanted to do. So for example, with your posts, it checked who it is exactly you would like to see this post, from what group of friends, for example. So if you remember, we talked about the fact that you can form different groups of friends, and that, or you could decide what exactly you want to make available to these different groups. And that basically was what Privacy Checkup was wanting to do, to make sure that you are defining what it is you want to do. And so it would guide you through a couple of steps to make sure that what it is you have defined is what you actually want to see. Okay. And then there are other privacy automation examples. So just to show you that we are moving there or getting there. There are, for example, on Apple systems, you can have, for example, automated privacy software that allow you, for example, to protect certain social media platforms on your mobile device. So, for example, Facebook, Google+, Twitter, and so on. And basically, the idea is to allow you to try to control, for example, what applications continue to communicate, for example, when you're in transit or when you're not in a location in which you're not feeling quite secure. Okay, so basically Apple and Android mobile devices. So the next time I want to talk to you a little bit in this sort of, if you want to term them so, futuristic approaches to securing social network and social media profiles. So we talk, for example, next time about using encryption to secure social network profiles. And I would like to remind you, just before we stop for now, that we talked about automated privacy policies and the fact that it is a question of configuration, that for the most part, in most privacy policy configurations, we have to do this manually. There is some beginning support for doing this automatically, but you need to check to make sure that the privacy policies or the privacy settings that you have defined are what it is you want them to be.